Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a little bit of a box office breakdown on Saturday with the projections that we have for the weekend and also with the raw numbers we have as of this past Friday, which was yesterday, and it looks like Frozen 2 is continuing its march towards the billion-dollar mark. However, I do think there is something interesting to point out that could, and again, I want to stress that that is a very tepid could mean very bad news for the film, at least for the rest of the run of the film not being as impressive as the initial run. And so let's first start off by looking at the Friday numbers. And so as you can see, Frozen 2 had a 77% drop from Friday to Friday. So it's now going into its second weekend, and it had a 77% drop now in day 15. For those wondering why day 15 and not day 11 or 10, and the reason why is because this film got an early release because, of course, of the Thanksgiving holiday. But Frozen 2, 77% drop. Now, the reason why I say that's tepidly bad news, if that's even the word for it, is because it did come out during Thanksgiving. So it makes a lot of sense that the film would not be doing nearly as well on this Friday, seeing that many people were off during last Friday, especially for the Black Friday event. Many people had off of work or had off at school at the very least, and so it makes sense that families would be going out more so in droves when the entire family is off last weekend compared to this weekend. That being said, what will be interesting to see is if the Saturday and Sunday drops are comparable or maybe not nearly as bad, because the whole weekend drop, the week 1 to week 2 drop off, are always going to be determined based on the Friday to Sunday numbers, not just every individual day by itself. And so if the numbers are not nearly as drastic as that 77%, then you could see the film be able to get to that between 50 and 60% range, which is normal for most films. The reason why this film likely will see closer to the 65% drop range is because it came out over a holiday weekend. And does that mean that the film is dropping off tremendously to the point where it won't reach $1 billion? No, it's going to reach $1 billion at this point in time, because at the very worst, by the end of this weekend, it's going to end well over $800 million. And if you have over $800 million in the first 2 weeks, and we assume that that's about 60% of what you're going to make, well, then yeah, you're looking at a film that's probably going to make between 1.2, 1.4 billion by the end of its run. However, if the number is a huge drop, it does indicate, especially depending on how it does in the foreign markets, that the film may not make as much as was originally thought, because it overperformed in its opening weekend, and a lot of people said, how much can it perform? How much more can it continue to overperform? Can it keep the legs? Can it keep performing every single week after the opening weekend? And that is what is basically a giant question mark at this time, because the Friday indicator is not a very strong one, because, as I mentioned about the holiday difference, but we're not going to get the numbers for the weekend until tomorrow, sometime around 10, 11 or so Eastern Standard Time. And once we have those numbers, we'll be able to have a better indicator. And I'll put up my little chart that I have up. Once again, shout out to JJ for recommending that, where I'm breaking down the numbers going week by week for the first 2 weeks, and then giving you my projections on the industry standards of what films tend to make after the first 2 weeks and the overall total. And of course, hopefully trying to find out how much money this film actually costs. Because if you look in the summary here, we're not getting any type of budget for this film as of this point in time. And so I'm wondering if this film has even gotten a budgetary release yet, because sometimes films will try and hold off on it up to we'll try and hold on to it as much as they possibly can. So let's see, Frozen 2, this is saying that the movie cost $75 million. I don't buy that for a second. That's total nonsense. I don't know who would actually say that, but it looks like they have not released the official financials for this film, which is kind of weird. You normally have some type of release at this point in time. I'm sure a lot of it is basically projections as to how much the film actually costs to make, but it is kind of odd that we're not getting those numbers yet. If I had to guess, I would imagine that the film probably cost well north of $150 million just to make. In fact, let's just go ahead and try and see if we can come up with just even a somewhat close guess. So the first Frozen film cost $150 million. This film definitely would have cost a lot more than that. So let's assume it costs around 175, 200 max. That means that overall cost of the film to make it and market it was probably be close to the $400 to $500 million range, which means that the film needs to make well north of $1 billion to become profitable and to make a lot of money off of its investment, which again, based on these early numbers we're getting, seems very likely to happen. And I'll have the full breakdown on how the numbers work out and what the film is likely going to make by the end of its run, and also how it compares to a budget. But I don't know if we're going to get a budget between now and tomorrow, but I will probably pull up this number to kind of have as a reference point, so that way we have an idea of probably how much it actually costs. Knives Out is actually also performing very well. I think it's exceeding expectations by a great amount. I know some people have been trying to say, oh, well, the marketing for it was a lot more than what the normal marketing is. But then you have to keep in mind also that there was a foreign financer that picked up this film too, meaning that its overall cost in the foreign markets, because sometimes in certain countries like China, for example, studios don't get 50-50 or even 60-40% splits. It's usually China, for example, gets 25, or China gets 75% of the box office while the studio gets 25%. But because they had a foreign aid in that, it means that in some of the countries that they're playing in, they would have gotten better deals, better returns on investment, which means that the film will get more of its money back than typical films. So if indeed the marketing costs more, that pretty much would have evened it out. And so this film is still definitely performing to the point where it will make some money. It'll definitely break even at this point in time, because the projected, or the most recent numbers that we had for the budget for the film were around $40 million, meaning it costs around $60 million to both make and to promote this movie. And with that being the case, that means that the film is very much on pace to make that money back as early as this weekend, but definitely by next weekend as well. And it is interesting. It's a film that I've not seen yet myself, but from people that I trust. I've heard a lot of people say that, hey, for the most part, it's entertaining. Is it great? Not necessarily. Is it okay? Okay, it's fine for what it is. But I think that Mark the Cyborg, who's a part of the Geeks and Gamers team, said it best. He wants this film to succeed because he wants Rian Johnson to realize, oh, if I make these smaller independent films, then I might have an audience. Then I might actually have people want to go see my movies because I might actually make good movies. I've already shown that I can't make a Star Wars movie, so let me just stay away from that. Of course, Rian Johnson would never think that, because he thinks that his Last Jedi film was fantastic and was one of the greatest Star Wars films of all time, even though the fans very much are against it. But if the film is indeed going to be doing this well, and we understand that films like Solo Star Wars Story, which, by the way, hashtag Solo lost money very much because of the fact that The Last Jedi was such a terrible film and really divided the fan base. If this is the direction that he's not to go in, then you know what? I hope he does well here, because if this is where he sticks and if this is where he stays, and if making money here is what's going to keep him away from Star Wars, hey, go right ahead, man. I still won't see your movies because you're an asshat, but you go right ahead. And then, of course, Ford v. Ferrari, which we have speculated might not be losing as much money as I thought because of potential deals with companies like Coca-Cola, or even the Ford company and Ferrari itself, because of the name recognition and the product placement in its film. And those, we can't really account for how much money they would have gotten from those promotions. If we look at the raw numbers, though, it's still not looking nearly as great as some people might think. The domestic total likely by the end of its run can get very close to, if not cross, the $100 million mark. But as I've mentioned in every previous update, the international box office really is not showing up for this movie, which is not a surprise because it's being told and marketed as an American story, as an American tale, and those types of stories don't really tend to do nearly as well in the foreign markets. Not always, but in this case, definitely for sure, $150 million is not terrible, except when you compare it to the fact that it cost $100 million to produce it and probably cost another $50 million to promote it, meaning that it's just getting to the fact that it's just getting to the point of crossing the overall cost of the film. The problem, though, being the studio does not get 100% of that worldwide box office total, but gets rather 60%. So that's why you can see that they're actually at a loss still at this time. They would need to make well north of $200 million if they were going to make even and make profit even on that number. So it is interesting to be breaking down these numbers and be following these week to week. And I really hope that Ford Ferrari does end up making money because of those promotional deals that they likely had, because it's a great film that everyone should go see. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. Do you think that Ford v. Ferrari is going to cross $100 million here in the United States, here in the domestic market with Canada as well? Let me know your thoughts about that. Also, for Knives Out, I mean, it really is making money. We can't really ignore that at this point in time. I don't like Rian Johnson. I don't want his film to make money. But you know what? If I can find any sense of joy and happiness in this news story and in this in this fact, well, if this means he won't make Star Wars films anymore, then you know what? Go right ahead, continue to make your little independent films. And then for Frozen 2, do you think that Frozen 2 is going to have this 77% drop, like this drastic drop from week 1 to week 2? And if you do, is it because of Thanksgiving? Is it because of the holiday that it opened up in? Or do you think it could be because families are saying, oh, I don't want to bring my child back to this because it wasn't that good, at least for adults? I think kids are going to thoroughly enjoy this film. I know that a lot of my students have thoroughly enjoyed this movie, but when you really think about the story, and as an adult who cares more about story and more about things, working coherently with each other, I think that we might not be nearly as willing to be going back to see the movie, even if we have kids who want to go see it. We would rather probably just pay the $5-6 a month for Disney Plus and show them the original Frozen film, because that's gonna be a lot cheaper. And also, I think that in the end of the day, that's going to be the film that's going to be much more well remembered than this one when it comes out on home release. But let me know your thoughts about this stuff and all the things we talked about in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, give me a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.